Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation hosted by Seacoast Mental Health and the REAP program. Oh my goodness, the importance of goodness in our lives. So I'm Amory Olson Hayward. I'm the director for the REAP program. Our presenter today is Jennifer Bozak, who is one of our long-standing counselors. Oops, sorry. So she's going to be presenting the information. In the chat box, I just put in a quick link. If you could just click on it and fill out the demographics for for yourself, that would be wonderful. That is helpful for our funders, just to get a sense of who we're serving, and just as well as helping to support our program. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen, and as things come up, certainly you can put questions in the chat box, and we'll have a little time at the end to answer any questions you may have. Thank you so much. And Jen, it's all yours.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jennifer, and I am a REAP counselor here at Seacoast Mental Health. Seacoast Mental Health Center provides mental health and REAP services to people who reside in Rockingham County. Next slide, please. So what is REAP? It's a short-term outreach program. Okay, it's an acronym. It stands for Referrals, Education, Assistance, and Prevention. And so besides working with older adults on issues with their daily living, REAP provides an overall emphasis on mental health, cognitive issues, and substance abuse. And REAP counselors are situated under each of the 10 community mental health centers across the state of New Hampshire. So, services, REAP services, they are free and confidential. They actually are also unique to the state of New Hampshire, which I think is fantastic. Services include brief counseling for an older adult, up to 5 sessions. They also could include counseling for caregivers of an older adult. Examples of housing managers, service coordinators, senior housing sites, visiting nurses, home health aides, APS. We provide technical assistance to many of those folks. And we also provide educational sessions to elderly housing sites and community environments, and this would include one of those. Next slide, please. So who's eligible for REAP? So REAP is for adults in New Hampshire, 60 years and older, or like I said, for caregivers of an older adult, any age there. Also, adults that are under 60 that are permanently disabled living in elderly housing. And then it could also be professionals who work with older adults, like I mentioned, that technical assistance piece. The one caveat is that REAP is not available to people who are active clients of any community mental health center. Next slide. So today we're going to talk about goodness, something I think everyone can agree in the state of affairs right now that the world needs more of, and we can all focus on. So what we're going to learn today is recognizing why goodness is important and why it's in everyone's best interest. We're going to understand that, it takes action to do good. We'll talk about some of the obstacles of goodness and how we can overcome those. And then we're going to generate an action list of ideas about how you can use goodness or share with your clients how to use goodness actively in everyday life. Next slide, please. What is the most recent good act that you have practiced? I think right now I'd like you to just take a minute, and if you would put in the chat box your first name and just quick good act that you can recall you've done, that would be wonderful to share. Just take a minute and see what we get. Diana, helping train new people at work. Fantastic. And Jan has made Valentine cookies for her neighborhood kids. I love that. Very selfless. Really great answers. And if you don't have an act that you want to share right now, that's fine, but please take the time to put your first name in the chat box. We know that you're in attendance. And also, if you do think of your act during the session, please still put it in the chat box to share with everybody. Next slide, please. How do we define goodness? That's a doozy, right? So I think that what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you again to use the chat box, and we're going to talk about everybody's definition of goodness, and I'm going to share a definition that I have for today. So think about what goodness means to you, and please put it in the chat box. While you're doing that, I'm going to go over a few other possible answers. Some people say kindness, a benefit to others is goodness, how we treat others and how others treat us. Unselfishness, great answer. Goodness makes life worth living. It enhances the quality of life. Someone else said to be good for someone or something. Great answer, integrity. Leanne said being kind to those who you may not like. Ooh, I like that one. Treating others how you want to be treated comes from Diana. Yes, that golden rule. Getting outside your own life situation from Jan. Interesting. I like that, Jan. It's a great perspective. So you can see everyone has their own definition of goodness. And I think what I'd like to talk about here is goodness being a noun versus a verb. So, I looked up the definition of goodness, the quality of being morally good or virtuous, kindness, generosity, right? Moral excellence, the best part of anything, that essence. I think of goodness as a verb, to do good, to benefit, to cause to improve or gain, to do. So goodness, for the sake of this training, is going to equal action. And I think it's important to talk about kindness versus goodness and kind of the difference there. So kindness may involve being generous, being considerate, whereas goodness involves righteousness and action, doing what is right, doing. Both are good virtues, but we're talking about doing. Next slide, please. So I'd like you to think about this as I read this out loud. How do you think your life would be improved if other people around you practiced goodness? Just a little food for thought. Martha is commenting less stress. Or how do you think your life would be improved if you yourself practiced ongoing goodness. Our poll isn't working. That's okay. Just think about this for yourself. So happier. Yeah, good answer, Leanne. Happier, less stressed, good things, right? If we are practicing goodness or other people around us are. So if we think about calmness, yes, very good, Leanne. Think about in American culture, unfortunately, goodness is rarely considered a value. People may think it's simply irrelevant. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? You can answer in the chat. Our poll isn't working right now. And it is something to think about. Why isn't goodness a priority in our society? We prioritize work, money, we judge our successes by tangible things, and not always our behavior. So this is something for us to be considering when we talk about goodness. Wow. Right, Martha, too focused on ourselves. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. Right. So next slide, Anne-Marie, please.
And I see Deborah saying goodness sounds like goody two shoes, too simple.
Okay. Good comments.
And I would just want to throw out my own thoughts in that, I think sometimes it's not just being too focused on ourselves, but with over the last couple of years, just being so overwhelmed with everything happening around us that it makes it really hard to step outside of our little scope.
Exactly. Yep. Okay. And here we are with the obstacles to our goodness, right? And just like Anne-Marie was mentioning. So, that first one is peer pressure that we experience, no matter what age. Everybody's doing it. I want to fit in. People might not like me. So that's that peer pressure. Another obstacle is that low self-esteem. People with low self-confidence, again, they want to fit in or, don't have that personal willpower to be honest and advocate. So another big obstacle to goodness is cognitive issues, a mental illness, severe and persistent mental illness, particularly medical or life stressors. We think about, like Anne-Marie just mentioned, we have the COVID piece, which has caused a lot of isolation, a lot of world stress, and that also kind of puts another blanket of pressure of stress on us. So we've got to be mindful of that. And I would also say, on the world stage right now too, what's happening and playing out in the world can impair our wanting and acting in a positive light, I think. So drugs and alcohol, also under those day-to-day stressors and life changes. I think we need to talk about that, misuse of alcohol and medication can change our perspective in life into a negative one. And alcohol, we need to recall, is a depressant in and of itself. So that can make it harder to see positive aspects of life and relationships. So again, belief that it won't make a difference, okay? It's not overly valued. And so it's not a priority to kind of practice goodness. And people don't kind of buy into it the way that we hope. And partly that is that last belief that sometimes people are expecting something in return and not just selfishly giving or being quote unquote good. Next slide, please. So why don't people always act with goodness in their hearts? You can certainly please put some of your answers in the chat if you'd like. Obviously, some of the things that we talked about on that last slide ring true, right? As you're putting in your answers, trying to look at the same time, too much work, selfish, past trauma and fear, those can definitely play in, right? Very good. Deborah makes a good point about fear holding people back. So some of my answers are people worry about being seen as goody-goody, right? People think good guys kind of finish last sometimes, that survival of the fittest, right? And what's a sign of strength or weakness. People find it easy to rationalize bad behavior. And we're going to get into that the next slide that we do. But also it plays into why aren't people always acting in goodness is it can have to do with past trauma and experiences. Thank you, Jessica. Your upbringing, your childhood, cultural and religious beliefs, they create a framework for viewing the world around us, right? And so we need to be mindful of those perceptions. Someone already mentioned it here, Leanne. People can be self-absorbed, self-centered, right? Not selfless, which is what we're talking about here. And it could be due to other distractions or stressors, which, limit the time for having a better perspective about the world. Again, Americans, particularly, they not buy into the idea that they personally can make a difference. But we see it in personal stories, so we know that it's true. And it's not a prominent current value of our society, but I do think that we all can improve on that and lessen the stigma around mental illness, depression, and mood. We talk about goodness overall and righteousness. So I think the other thing is to discuss, like somebody had mentioned it earlier, the difference of goody-goody versus being good. So being goody-goody, that's like a personal choice, okay? It's not an action or doing something positive or morally good. Action is the key, okay? So next slide, please, Anne-Marie. I love this picture that Anne-Marie picked. Okay, because we all use rationalizations at times to excuse our bad behavior, okay? You can think of a story, give a short example in the chat if you want. You don't have to share. You can think, I mean, there's several examples I'm thinking of. Easy to kind of think about your family members before yourself, but there's been times when, I have used rationalization to excuse me from taking action. And I think we all kind of have at one point or another. Some examples: cutting the line, telling a white lie to somebody. One of the examples that came up is cheating on a test. I think the best example is seeing something and something of importance and not saying anything. That's a real big one.
I like Diana put up, people convince themselves someone else deserved it.
Yes, interesting. Yeah. Good one, Diana. Thank you for sharing that.
Or you only live once was another one that was put up.
Yes. Yep. Right. So these rationalizations that we create in our mind help prevent us from acting on goodness. So we need to be mindful of all those rationalizations. And when we recognize that they're starting, we need to stop, pause, think about it. And this leads us into our next slide, which is about tolerance. So kindness begins with understanding that we all struggle, right? And this slide I'm actually going to go over because I think it's really important. We have to be kind in life. You never know the burden that someone else is carrying, okay? We know somebody may look like they have everything together, great job, great life. We don't know the struggles that that person has. And it's judgmental of us and wrong of us to be considering people in one light or another when we really don't know. So teaching tolerance, talk about, and I know some of you professionals on the present today. So I think this is a real big piece, especially when we talk about older adults and tolerance and stigma, those kinds of things. So recognizing that our own and others' personal strengths and contributions are important, right? Honoring cultures and traditions of others. And I think this is another thing, we work a lot with housing. And so this would be an area of housing that I think would be wonderful for our older adults to learn some tolerance. Promoting openness and respect by demonstrating compassion and empathy, okay? Negative actions, such as gossip and bullying and judgments, those can in part be combated by teaching and reinforcing tolerance, okay? So I think improving one's moral character kind of happens as we practice. And I love this quote. It's a magnet I have on my refrigerator. Our differences enrich us. Such a vital quote. I always tell my kids, if we were all the same, wouldn't life be boring? So it's such a vital part of our society because those are the personal strengths and contributions that we all bring to the table. So accepting diversity is so very important when we're talking about being good and kind. Next slide, please. Feeling good about being good. So think of some situations when you've really felt good about being good. It's a pretty awesome feeling. It's very rewarding, promotes empowerment, strength of character, self-confidence. You do feel good about yourself. It's very rewarding. If others, people who are generally treated well by others, that mentality of what goes around comes around, that kind of golden rule. And feeling good about being good, it definitely helps fostering acceptance of other people and differences in others. I love this part. Goodness, like anything in life, will become a habit if you practice it enough. And we know we don't value it as much as we should in our society, but I think that the more we practice it, it's gonna become growing and bigger and bigger. And we'll talk about the contagiousness of goodness in a minute. The more good people there will be in the world, the better the world will be. Yes.
Just to build off of that next to the last bullet point there, research shows that when we focus on positive things, when we focus on being good, it actually strengthens the positive neural pathways in your brain. So the more you focus on the negative, the stronger those negative neural pathways become, and that's where you get pulled more often. When you make a conscious choice to be more positive and to look for the good, you're actually strengthening. So you're actually creating physical change within your brain when you do that.
Good. Oh, I love this slide. How is goodness contagious? Mhm. Doing good or performing selfless acts of kindness makes you feel good afterward. It can be catchy, and it leaves me with wanting to do more. I can imagine some people may feel the same. And then conversely, when others are good to you, it makes you want to do good to others. I was looking this up when I was researching, and they're talking about moral elevation is that warm, fuzzy feeling we get when we're in the presence of human goodness. And so it's inspiring people to do better or to be better. And people are more apt to act um, altruistically towards others in that way. So I think the other way that I'm sure everyone in the group will connect with this is pay it forward examples is a perfect way to demonstrate how goodness is contagious. Um, and I'll give you a few now. And please be willing to share if you'd like. We'd love that. Let somebody in front of you in line. Let someone cut in front of you in line, either in person or in your car. Can you imagine? How about over tipping a server, a food server, perhaps? Something that doesn't cost money. Greeting people with a smile. I think that can be real contagious. Spreading good news is another wonderful way to spread goodness. And this one, my brother taught me years ago before the Easy Pass, and it's fun to do. It's very rewarding, and that's paying for someone's toll behind you. That's another common one. So I think, I think we need to pay attention again to kindness versus goodness, right? And so kindness, generosity, yes, consideration, goodness, and a righteous act. All right. So next slide, please. So this is a slide that I've had in used in other groups because it's incredibly powerful. And my feeling is there was a elderly couple on the train, and there was a young man who was struggling to put on his tie, and he did not know how to do it. And I'm just going to read to you just a little bit of it. So they were a couple in Atlanta, Georgia, and the woman in the red coat spotted this young man struggling and asked her husband to go out and help him. There was like 500,000 shares on social media about this. He was struggling with his tie. She said, "Do you know how to tie it?" He said, "No, ma'am." She tapped her husband on the shoulder and said, "Come to this side of the train and teach this man how to tie his tie." And what I love about this story so much is, one, it didn't cost any money. Two, it was a selfless act. And I work with older adults, and I love the fact that an older adult taught a younger person something so very special, very selfless of him. And it's quite a moment. So to me, when we're thinking of how we can act, quote unquote, good in our day to day, we do need to think out of the box, like Jan said earlier. We do need to pay attention and be aware of what's going on around us and how we can maybe offer some kindness and goodness, maybe non tangibly. Um, how do you think performing small acts of kindness can make a difference in the world or just your neighborhood? You know, everybody's seen that. Practice random acts of kindness, right? Practice senseless acts of beauty. So, what we want to do now is really think about how you actually can make that happen. And I want you to think about how are some of the acts of kindness you could do that would benefit the world, your community, your neighborhood, the culture of your living facility, or your life. And feel free to jot them down or share in the chat box. We would love to hear some answers. Everybody has something different to add. Kindness begets kindness. Oh, yes. Bring down my neighbor's trash cans. Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. I work a lot in elderly housing. One very common thing that I see peers helping peers with is getting their mail or getting their trash or holding the door. Let's see. Deborah shared, sometimes you're in a hard place yourself and then you feel guilty that you're not doing good. Definitely. Yeah. And that is hard when we're in a hard place ourselves. So I would just say, first off, self-care for yourself. And secondly, think about empowering yourself by building off the energy you will get reciprocally from being kind. That makes sense. Oh my God, Martha, clearing the snow off cars. Brilliant. You could make so many people's day that way. Make it a point to say hello to neighbors passing by. I think we can all say if you see somebody and make eye contact with them, they don't smile. Generally, you may not smile back, but if you get a smile, you're probably going to smile back and maybe even engage in conversation. These are all great, great answers.
I just wanted to jump on as well with Deborah's comment. Deborah, I think sometimes, and I think this is really important for all of us to think about, is that there is a cycle to life, and so there are times when maybe we can't reciprocate or do the things that we would love to be able to do, and that there is grace in accepting help from others and allowing them that opportunity to feel good, and knowing that at some point an opportunity will present itself to you when you're in a position to do it. And just so I think just having trust in that.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. Yep. Yes, and Bernard, be the first to smile. I love that. Especially with some of the mandates with masks going down. I think we can all say to see someone's face safely, it's going to be a wonderful thing. One woman is knitting hats for Afghan refugees. Amazing. I think we know when we do something for someone else, it's energizing if we're able to. I mean,
I love that quote. I am wearing the smile you gave me.
oh yeah, that's a great quote, Anne. We might have to add that to the presentation. That's good. Compliments. Right. Exactly. Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide. And this next slide, we're actually going to be giving this out as a handout. And I'm just going to touch on a few. The first one that I wanted to mention was just mentioned in the last slide, compliments. I think that it is so wonderful. I just love giving compliments because I love to see people's reaction, and they usually light up, and it somehow can ease their day, especially with older adults. I just think compliments is a very nice way to be kind to people that we don't do in our society a lot. That's one note. A smile, that quote by Anne. Oh my gosh, random acts of kindness into practice. When you're walking down the road or you're in the aisle at the grocery store with someone, that is non-verbal communication at its best, right? So that's smile. Holding the door for somebody, and not just people who may physically look like they need the door open for them, but for anybody. I had to, I held the door the other day, and I remember thinking I could not hold the door, and it'll be about 3 seconds for the person to get to the door. No, just stood there for those seconds, let the person come in, and they thanked me. So we need to make space for kindness in our life. The other one that I think is really important that I love so much is sending a note. And sending a note of thanks or appreciation. And it could be so making a card at home and sending it to a friend for no reason, or handwritten note of thanks. Down below, it says send a note of thank you to a person who's helped you in the past. And I love that one because it could just be you want to share some kindness about thanking them for something that they helped you with that they maybe didn't even recognize that. Well, that's a wonderful thing to share. So just remember, like Scott Adams says, there's no one thing, a small act of kindness. Every act creates a ripple effect. And it's that small ripple effect that is going to slowly improve our culture around kindness in our housing facilities, in our county, in our state, in our world. So you'll get this as a handout. And so let's talk just for a second about non-tangible items, okay, that you can give or you can offer. And so kind words can be short and easy to speak, but their echoes are truly endless. We can all recall when someone has given us a wonderful compliment, right? Or said something that's not so kind. Those can stick with us, right? So words can be very, very powerful. That's another reason why compliments are so beautiful. And so when we think about using goodness in our life related to language, we're thinking about reducing using words like is or should or not, right? And when I was doing some research on this, I found that they were saying that in our language, we actually use more positive words than negative words. So we have a word happy. We're going to use unhappy to describe that instead of a whole separate word. Maybe that's not the greatest example, but it really is used more, which I thought was interesting. And so here are some words for you to think about when you're thinking of how, as professionals, that you can use words to help foster this. And that would be like validation, reassurance, or reflectively listening, right? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So I think I've drilled this home that it is positive action that will actually make some change and and it's actually the foundation of practicing goodness. And it really is in everyone's best interest, for yourself, for your residents, for your community, and for our world. Mark Twain said, kindness is a language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see. And we all need it right now in our world. And so I think it's important that we practice, right? We can talk till the cows come home, but it's really action is what we're looking for. And that leads us into our next slide, which is you're going to participate in a goodness challenge, which you didn't know when you signed up for this, but you are. Don't worry, you're not going to be on the spot right away. But we really want you to think about an action plan for random acts of kindness over this next week that you could do. So list the acts of kindness that you think you could do over the week, practice them, and then we want you to respond to us. And if you have an amazing story or a story you want to share, we would love for you to report it to us on our Seacoast Mental Health referral line. And we can put that in the chat box for you. And it's also on one of your slides moving forward. Just get this in here for you. So, oh, thank you. Okay. So we, when we were organizing this, the Goodness Challenge was originally 2 days. And I think Anne Marie, we made it a week. And I think that gives everyone long enough to try at least 1 to 2 random acts of kindness. And I'm going to go back again to Jan Kennedy's comment that sometimes it really may take us, they have us remove ourselves from our comfort zone to try to practice some of these goodness challenges. And that's okay. That's how we all learn and grow, right? So please keep us posted on your goodness challenge. Next slide, please. So I want to make sure that I touch on 2 resources for everyone here. One is NAMI, National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. And we have each state has their own separate entity. And so here is the phone number and the email. Fantastic resource for education, support, advocacy for families, especially wonderful. And then a very new resource in the state of New Hampshire, also wonderful. Rapid Response Access Point. This phone number that we're posting or email website is across the state of New Hampshire. It is a hub that you will be calling, set up by Beacon Health. You can call for yourself. You could call for friends and family. It's free to call. Having a mental health or substance use crisis, you call this access point number, the state hub, and they will send out rapid response support in your area if you then need it. So it's really a great resource everybody should know about and share with your residents, your clients, etc. And lastly, here's the REAP referral line. Again, if you want to share anything about your random acts of kindness you're going to try, I really appreciate you joining today. And I'm ecstatic about everyone's comments. I can't wait to read back through them. Anne Marie and I are here now. I know she's got a sharing an evaluation. And I know I've done just presenting today, But if anyone else would like to, now's the time. A little bit of time for questions or comments. If we're able to do that, have a question, feel free to put it in the chat.
So
Or
I just put in our jot form for the evaluation for today. So please take a few moments, and if you haven't completed the Survey Monkey, please do that as well. I will put both of those in the email that we'll send out afterwards. These are just really helpful for us in terms of our funding. We do have to report back what we've been doing and who we've been helping. It also helps us in terms of just reviewing the programming and making updates. So yeah, and we can email out the slides as well for you. But if I know some of you may have more than one person at your location, if you can just make sure everyone does complete the information. The jot form has more than one section for everybody. Yes, you certainly can do that, Martha, by all means. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, please put those into the chat box. We'll be around for a little bit to answer any of them. We do have another presentation next month. Is it April 5th? I think is that first Tuesday. And that is speaking up and speaking out. So let's see. Deborah, your question is, speaking of small acts of kindness, what about big ones? Focusing on big. So is your question focusing on big acts of kindness? Is that trying to clarify?
yeah.
So I'm gonna assume that's what you're talking about. If not, put it into the chat and I can redirect. But my thought is that I think sometimes there's so much happening, it can feel overwhelming to make huge changes. And so at least I can speak for myself with COVID. There was a lot of things going on, and at times it felt almost overwhelming of how am I going to impact all of this, especially in the role that I'm in. And I just had to times just take a step back and go, okay, I'm not in control of all of that. What is the one thing that I am in control of? So, my vision is this bigger picture. What's the one thing I can do to move me forward? So if I think more of incremental. So if you think of those small acts of kindness as small steps,
Yeah.
moving you towards that bigger goal, that may be, I think that's maybe a better or easier context, because I think the sense I have is it's like, well, if I'm just doing these small random acts, why is it even important? I'm moving towards a bigger goal of a more positive environment.
Yep. And I think along those lines, I agree in that maybe you're one of 20 people doing a small piece of a big project to help someone. So I do think we could be part of really big change for, let's say it's building a home for somebody, right? And your church is doing one little piece of that, right? So maybe it's just doing part of a bigger project. But I do like your thinking. We always want to think big.
And I think another thing to be thinking about too, and is also what may seem as something very small to us can at times have a really huge impact on somebody else. I know that there's times when they've talked to people who, are considering suicide. And they'll say, one person said something kind to me, and that made the difference. And so it's just understanding that, I was in the grocery store months ago, and the gentleman in front of me didn't have enough cash to pay for the few things he had in front of me. And I mean, I remember when I first moved out of the house, and there were times, oh my God, it's $25 and I only have 20, and what am I going to take out of this? We've all had those moments in our lives. But I had the cash. And for me, it wasn't a big deal, but for him, that may have been a really huge piece. That really could have impacted him and what was going on. We don't know. We don't know what's going on in other people's lives. So, and I know there have been opportunities where I've had people come back and say, "You said that one thing and that really stuck with me." And I'm like, "I didn't even think that was that important," but it was huge for them. And even thinking about times in your life when someone said or done something for you that was really impactful. Again, keeping in mind it may not have been a huge deal for them, but for you it really made a difference. So, just being kind of stepping outside of that a little bit. Any other questions, comments, feedback? Again, please, if you could finish those those surveys, that would be wonderful. We'll send them out with the information. I think my last little piece, just to be thinking about, is there is a lot going on in the world right now. People are under a significant amount of stress, and just giving that moment. I always say, just giving people grace. My favorite is, you're driving in the car and someone cuts you off, and we all start kind of, our little self talk about, oh geez, how selfish and da 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 da. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what's going on. They could be rushing to the hospital. They could have just gotten a very disturbing phone call from a family member. They could have gotten a poor diagnosis. We don't know. And so just recognizing, my favorite phrase is to say, they must be having a really bad day. And at that point, I give them, I don't feel so angry. I have some compassion. Um, so just try and have a little compassion in your life. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Jen, I don't know if you have any closing comments or.
I just, I think my closing comment is that I'm reading the chats and it's been inspiring to me. And I would just say that I would really welcome everyone who's joined, to please leave a comment on our referral line if you've done if you've done something maybe out of your comfort zone, because this program, we're going to be redoing this, and personal examples are wonderful. So that's how we learn, that's how we improve, and using those examples help others. So remember, action Jackson. Okay.
Wonderful. So good luck this week with your task, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.